The war between humans and the Xilari Empire had lasted for 7 years. Battles raged across planets, space stations, and warships. But in the end, humanity had won. The Xilari, a proud and powerful species known for their tall, armored bodies and unmatched strength, had finally surrendered. Their leaders, once arrogant, now sat defeated at the negotiating table. The peace treaty was signed, but it came with an unexpected condition. To secure lasting peace, the Xilari were ordered to bond with humans and produce children. Many Xilari warriors rejected the idea, especially Commander Valkessa. She had spent years fighting against humans, leading her soldiers with honor. Now, they expected her to accept a human as her mate. The very thought disgusted her. "I will never submit," she growled, standing before the council of Xilari elders. Her golden eyes burned with rage. "I would rather die than be claimed by a human." The elders exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The oldest among them, Elder Varn, spoke in a calm voice. "This is not about submission, Valkessa. It is about survival. Our species has lost. We must rebuild, or we will fade into history." Valkessa clenched her fists but said nothing. A human soldier's duty. On the human side, Captain Daniel Carter sat in a military office, reading his orders. The message was clear. He was assigned to oversee the Xilari integration process. Daniel wasn't happy about it. He had spent years fighting in the war, losing friends and brothers in battle. Now he was supposed to work with the very enemy he had once fought to defeat. The idea felt wrong. But orders were orders. A fellow officer smirked as he walked by. "So you're getting one of them, huh?" Daniel frowned. "It's not like that. I don't believe in forcing anyone into something they don't want." The officer laughed. "Good luck telling that to them. The Xilari would rather tear us apart than bond with us." Daniel sighed. He had no interest in controlling or owning anyone. If peace meant forcing people into relationships, then it wasn't peace at all. Still, his mission was clear. He would be assigned to one of the Xilari commanders to help with the transition, and that commander was Valkessa. The first meeting. The human ship landed on the Xilari homeworld, a planet of tall mountains and deep forests, where the sky burned with 2 red suns. Inside a grand hall, Valkessa stood in her black and gold battle armor, arms crossed, waiting. She had no intention of making this easy for anyone, especially the human they had chosen for her. The doors opened, and Daniel Carter stepped in. He was tall for a human, but smaller compared to the Xilari. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room like a soldier expecting danger. The moment their eyes met, the tension in the room thickened. Daniel stepped forward and nodded. "Commander Valkessa." She did not return the greeting. "So you're the human they sent to control me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I don't control anyone." Valkessa scoffed. "Then why are you here?" Daniel exhaled. "I didn't ask for this mission, and I'm sure you didn't ask for this situation either. But here we are." Silence. The other Xilari in the room shifted uncomfortably. The tension was clear. Neither of them wanted this arrangement. Valkessa narrowed her eyes. "Do not expect me to obey you, human. I do not see you as my equal." Daniel crossed his arms. "Good, because I don't see you as an enemy." That response caught her off guard. She had expected arrogance, maybe even cruelty, but not this. Before she could respond, the alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the hall. A Xilari officer rushed in, shouting, "Commander, we're under attack. The resistance has returned." The attack. Outside. Explosions rocked the city. The Xilari resistance, a group of warriors who refused to accept the treaty, had launched a surprise attack. Valkessa grabbed her weapons, her instincts kicking in. Daniel, without hesitation, pulled out his firearm and followed her. She shot him a glare. "You are not Xilari. Stay out of my way." Daniel smirked. and let you have all the fun. Not a chance. They ran side by side into battle. Blaster fire rained from the rooftops, and enemy fighters soared through the sky. The resistance aimed to destroy the capital before humans could claim their world. Valkessa fought fiercely, cutting down enemies with her plasma blades, but she noticed something strange. Daniel was keeping up with her. She expected him to be weak, slow, a burden. But instead, he fought like a warrior, quick and strategic, taking down enemies with precise shots. In the chaos of battle, their survival depended on one thing: trusting each other. And for the first time, Valkessa felt something unexpected. She didn't hate this human. Not yet. But the war wasn't over. Not for them. The streets of the Xilari capital were in chaos. Explosions shook the ground, and smoke filled the air as the resistance fighters launched their surprise attack. Valkessa moved like a blur, her plasma blades slicing through enemy lines, while Daniel stayed close behind, firing precise shots at their attackers. She expected him to be a burden, but he was holding his own. His movements were sharp, his reflexes quick, and he didn't hesitate to fight. It was not what she expected from a human. A resistance warrior lunged at Daniel from the side. Valkessa reacted instantly, spinning and slashing through the attacker's weapon, disarming him before delivering a powerful kick that sent him crashing into a wall. Daniel exhaled sharply. "I had that." Valkessa scoffed. "You were too slow." Before he could reply, another explosion rocked the streets, sending dust and debris flying. They took cover behind a fallen transport vehicle. Daniel reloaded his weapon. "So, who are these guys exactly? I thought your people accepted the treaty." Valkessa's expression hardened. "Most of us did, but the resistance refuses to surrender. They believe our empire should fight until the last warrior stands." Daniel sighed. "Sounds familiar. There were humans like that too after the war ended." Valkessa glanced at him. For the first time, she considered that maybe humans understood war better than she thought. An unexpected rescue. A loud roar echoed through the city as a resistance dropship hovered above the battlefield. Its side doors opened, and a massive Xilari warrior leaped out, landing heavily on the ground. Valkessa's eyes widened. "That's General Korin." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I take it he's not a friend." Valkessa clenched her fists. "He was my mentor." Korin's deep voice boomed across the battlefield. "Valkessa, you fight alongside humans now. Have you truly fallen this low?" Valkessa stepped forward. "I fight for peace, Korin. You should have accepted the treaty." Korin let out a harsh laugh. "Peace? With humans? I trained you better than this." Without warning, he charged forward, his massive frame barreling toward Valkessa. She barely dodged in time, rolling aside as his energy hammer smashed into the ground, cracking the stone beneath. Daniel didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon and fired several shots, but Korin's armor absorbed the blasts. The general swung his hammer in a wide arc, forcing them both to retreat. Valkessa gritted her teeth. "His armor is too strong. We need to hit his weak points." Daniel smirked. "Every big guy has weak points. We just have to find them." Korin rushed forward again, his hammer glowing with energy. Valkessa jumped over his attack, flipping midair, while Daniel dived to the side, rolling behind cover. Daniel noticed something, a small gap in Korin's armor near his back. He shouted, "Valkessa, hit his lower back. That's his weak spot." She didn't hesitate. The moment Korin turned to swing again, she dashed forward with incredible speed, sliding under his attack and driving her blade into the weak point. Korin roared in pain, stumbling forward. Daniel seized the moment, taking careful aim and firing a single shot at the exposed wound. The impact sent Korin crashing to the ground. The resistance soldiers saw their leader fall and began retreating, disappearing into the smoke-filled streets. Valkessa stood over Korin, breathing heavily. He looked up at her, his expression filled with pain and disbelief. "You chose them." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked away. A moment of understanding. After the battle, Valkessa and Daniel stood near the ruined city square, watching the remaining resistance forces flee into the wilderness. Daniel shook his head. That won't be the last of them. Valkessa nodded. No, they will return. She turned to Daniel. You saw Corin's weakness before I did. How? Daniel shrugged. Years of fighting. I've taken down bigger enemies before. Everyone has a weak point. Valkessa studied him for a long moment. This human was different from the others. He didn't fight with brute force. He fought with intelligence. She finally spoke. You are a skilled warrior. Daniel smirked. Is that a compliment? She huffed. Do not let it go to your head, human. For the first time, she didn't say the word human with hatred. Daniel noticed. He didn't comment on it, but he smiled slightly. The war between their species had ended, but a new battle had just begun, a battle of trust. And for the first time, Valkessa wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The city still smoldered from the attack. Fires crackled in the distance, and the air smelled of smoke and plasma burns. The people of Silari Prime were shaken but alive. The treaty still held. For now, Valkessa and Daniel walked through the ruins, scanning for survivors. She had never expected to fight alongside a human, yet here they were, side by side. Daniel let out a sigh. So what now? Your people just wait for the next attack. Valkessa's sharp eyes narrowed. We are warriors. We do not wait. We strike first. Daniel chuckled. Sounds familiar. Back on Earth, we called it preemptive action. Valkessa stopped and turned to him. I do not understand you, human. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I get that a lot. She folded her arms. You fight well. You think fast. You could have fled during the battle, but you didn't. Why? Daniel shrugged. Because running doesn't solve anything. You either stand your ground or get buried. Valkessa stared at him for a moment before nodding. Good. Daniel smirked. Was that another compliment? She huffed. Do not get used to it. A disturbing discovery. They'd reached the city's outer district, where most of the damage had been done. Collapsed buildings, shattered roads, and abandoned vehicles painted a grim picture. Valkessa's communicator crackled. Commander, we found something. You need to see this. They hurried to the location, where a group of Silari warriors stood over a damaged enemy dropship. Its hull was cracked, revealing its inner compartments. Valkessa's second-in-command, Rolvek, saluted. This was left behind by the resistance. We searched it. Daniel stepped forward and peered inside. What did you find? Rolvek hesitated before pointing to a metal crate, its surface covered in strange markings. Valkessa frowned. That is not Silari tech. Daniel knelt down and brushed off the dust. His expression darkened. It's not. This is human. A silence fell over the group. Valkessa's voice was sharp. Explain. Daniel exhaled. This logo, this is from a Terran weapons manufacturer. This crate is from Earth. Rolvek growled. Are you saying humans are supplying the resistance? Daniel's jaw clenched. No, but someone is. Who can be trusted? The realization hit Valkessa hard. The war had ended, but someone, somewhere, was keeping the conflict alive. Daniel turned to her. I need to contact my people. Rolvek bristled. That is not wise. If humans are involved, we cannot trust them. Valkessa considered this. The logical choice was to keep Daniel contained. Yet he had fought for her people. He had saved lives. Finally, she nodded. You will have your communication, but I will listen. Daniel smirked. Didn't think I'd get privacy. They returned to the city's command center, where Daniel was given access to the communications hub. He punched in a secure frequency. After a few moments, a voice responded. Terran Defense Command. Identify yourself. Daniel took a breath. Sergeant Daniel Carter. I need information on illegal arms trade. Someone selling Terran weapons to the Resistance. A pause. Then the voice replied, "Hold position, Carter. We're sending someone." Daniel frowned. Sending who? The line went dead. Valkessa crossed her arms. That did not sound reassuring. Daniel sighed. No, it didn't. They had uncovered something far bigger than just a rebel attack. And now, the real fight was about to begin. Daniel paced the command center, his mind racing. Someone was selling Terran weapons to the Xilari Resistance. That meant humans were involved in this war, even after the peace treaty. But who? And why? Valkessa stood nearby, arms crossed. She didn't trust this new development. The war was supposed to be over, yet something, or someone, was keeping the fires burning. The communicator crackled again. "Sergeant Carter, this is Commander Riggs of the Terran Defense Fleet. Your report is being reviewed. Stand by for further orders." Daniel frowned. "Stand by. That's it. That's it." The transmission ended. Daniel exhaled sharply. They're stalling. Valkessa's sharp eyes focused on him. Why would your leaders hesitate? Daniel ran a hand through his short, cropped hair. Because if humans are involved, it's going to be messy. Valkessa didn't like this answer. We do not have time to stand by. The Resistance will strike again. Daniel nodded. Then we need to move first. A dangerous plan. They gathered in the war room, surrounded by glowing holographic displays of the planet. Rulvek and other Xilari warriors stood in attention. Valkessa tapped the console, revealing a map of a nearby mountain base. "This is where the Resistance is hiding," she said. "We suspect they are receiving shipments there." Daniel leaned forward. "So we find the proof and shut them down." Rulvek growled. "You assume you will be allowed to come with us." Valkessa shot him a look. "Sergeant Carter has fought beside us. He will go." Rulvek looked displeased, but didn't argue. Daniel smirked. "Guess that means I'm in." Valkessa turned back to the map. "We leave in 1 hour. The journey begins." The sun had just begun to set when their convoy left the ruined city. A mix of armored transports and hover bikes sped across the wastelands, kicking up dust as they went. Inside one of the transports, Daniel checked his rifle. Valkessa watched him. "You have fought in many battles." Daniel shrugged. "Enough to know that every fight feels like the first." She considered this. Humans are strange. Daniel grinned. "We get that a lot." The convoy pressed forward into the mountains. The air grew colder, and the dense fog made visibility difficult. Rulvek's voice crackled over the communicator. "We are approaching the enemy base." Valkessa gave a signal. "We proceed on foot from here." The warriors disembarked, weapons ready. The silence of the mountains was unsettling. Daniel whispered, "It's too quiet." Then the first shot rang out. The ambush. Energy blasts rained down from the cliffs above. The Resistance had been waiting for them. Valkessa shouted, "Take cover." Daniel dived behind a rock, returning fire. The enemy was well armed, too well armed. They weren't just scavengers. They were being supplied by someone powerful. Rulvek growled. "They knew we were coming." Daniel gritted his teeth. "We've got a leak." Valkessa's eyes narrowed. "Someone inside our ranks." Daniel's stomach twisted. That meant their entire mission had been compromised. He turned to Valkessa. "We need to push forward. If we retreat, we lose our chance." She nodded. "Then we fight." The battle raged on. Explosions shook the mountains, and fire lit up the dark sky. Daniel and Valkessa moved as one, covering each other as they advanced. They had come looking for answers, but what they found was betrayal. Energy blasts streaked through the air, lighting up the mountains in flashes of blue and red. Daniel ducked behind a rock as a bolt barely missed his head. The Resistance fighters had them pinned down, and the battle was turning against them. "We're sitting ducks here," Daniel shouted over the noise. Valkessa crouched beside him, her sharp golden eyes scanning the cliffs above. We must break their line. Daniel glanced at Rulvek, who was growling in frustration. Can you give us cover fire? The Xilari warrior bared his teeth. You ask as if I would say no. He signaled his squad, and within seconds, a barrage of return fire lit up the enemy's position. Valkessa moved first, leaping over the rocks with graceful speed, dodging incoming fire as if she could predict their shots. Daniel followed close behind, his rifle barking as he covered their advance. As they reached a narrow path leading toward the enemy base, something caught Daniel's eye. A familiar insignia painted on one of the enemy crates. His stomach twisted. That was a Terran military supply box. The truth unfolds. The fighting slowed as the resistance forces pulled back toward their base. Daniel, Valkessa, and Rulvek led the charge, pushing deeper into the enemy stronghold. They reached an open clearing where several large supply crates sat stacked in neat rows. The insignia was on every single one of them. Daniel knelt and pried one open. Inside were Terran rifles, explosives, and tactical gear, fresh supplies. His heart pounded. Someone from the Terran military was feeding weapons to the enemy. Valkessa stepped closer, her expression dark. Your people are behind this. Daniel clenched his jaw. Not my people, but someone with power. Rulvek snarled. So the humans break their own peace treaty. Are we surprised? Daniel ignored him and activated his communicator. Command, this is Sergeant Carter. We have a problem. There was silence. Then, static. Daniel's gut sank. They were being jammed. Valkessa tensed. Someone does not want the truth to get out. The betrayal. A sound came from behind them, the click of a weapon being raised. Daniel spun, rifle ready, but froze when he saw who it was. Commander Riggs, his superior officer, standing there in full battle gear, flanked by human soldiers, soldiers who should not have been here. Daniel's hands tightened around his weapon. Commander. Riggs gave a slow smile. Sergeant, you always were too curious. Valkessa stepped forward, her muscles tensed. You are supplying the resistance. Riggs chuckled. The war is good for business, and keeping the Xilari weak means humanity stays on top. Daniel felt his anger rising. You signed a peace treaty. You swore the war was over. Riggs shrugged. Peace? There's no profit in peace. The realization hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about survival. It was about power. And he had been a pawn in the game. Outnumbered, Riggs lifted his rifle. I can't let you leave with this information. Daniel exchanged a look with Valkessa. They were outnumbered, but they weren't out of options. Now, Daniel shouted. Before Riggs could react, Valkessa moved like lightning. She lunged forward, knocking his weapon aside. Rulvek roared and charged at the nearest soldier. Daniel fired, taking down one of Riggs' men. Chaos erupted in the clearing. Riggs snarled, swinging a fist at Daniel, but Daniel ducked, countering with a hard punch to the gut. The older man staggered, but he wasn't down yet. Valkessa fought like a whirlwind, disarming two soldiers before they could react. Her strength and speed were terrifying. But they were still outnumbered. Daniel's mind raced. They needed a distraction. He spotted a crate of explosives. That would do. A desperate gamble. Daniel sprinted toward the explosives, dodging gunfire. Riggs saw him and roared, "Stop him!" Too late. Daniel grabbed a detonator and smashed it against the crate. Boom! A massive explosion ripped through the clearing, sending shockwaves through the air. Smoke and fire erupted, swallowing everything in chaos. Daniel hit the ground hard, the force knocking the air from his lungs. Debris rained down around him. Through the smoke, he saw Valkessa pulling herself up, her eyes burning with fury. Riggs was gone, and so were most of his men. Daniel coughed, pushing himself up. We need to get this information out. Valkessa nodded. Then we run. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burnt metal. Daniel groaned as he pushed himself up from the ground, his ears ringing from the explosion. Around him, the wreckage of the enemy base lay in flames. Valkessa coughed, waving away the dust as she steadied herself. Her golden eyes darted through the chaos, searching for danger. Rulvek was already on his feet, his muscular frame tense with battle readiness. "We have to move," Valkessa said urgently. Daniel nodded. "Riggs won't stay down for long. He'll regroup and come after us." They needed to get the proof of his betrayal back to command. But first, they had to survive. Hunted. As they sprinted toward the mountains, the sound of approaching aircraft roared above them. "Dropships," Rulvek growled. Daniel glanced up. 3 dark silhouettes cut through the sky, moving fast. They weren't here to rescue. They were hunting. "They're tracking us." Valkessa pulled a small device from her belt and crushed it in her palm. "They planted a beacon on us." Daniel's gut twisted. They had been marked. "We have to shake them off," he said. "Split up. We meet at the old Silari ruins east of here." Valkessa hesitated. "Are you sure?" Daniel gave a grim smile. "I'll make sure they chase me. You get the evidence back to command." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Don't die, human." "No promises," he said before sprinting toward the forest. The chase. Daniel heard the aircraft shift direction, following him instead of Valkessa and Rulvek. His plan worked. Blaster fire tore through the trees behind him, splitting bark and sending leaves into the air. The soldiers weren't taking prisoners. Gotta keep moving. Daniel zigzagged between the trees, his body aching, but his instincts sharp. He needed a way to lose them. Fast. Then he saw it, a ravine up ahead. It was steep, nearly a vertical drop. But there was a river at the bottom. It was a risk, but so was getting shot. Daniel didn't slow down. He sprinted full speed, then jumped. Underwater escape. The wind roared past him as he fell. The cold water hit like a hammer, knocking the air from his lungs. He plunged deep, the river's current yanking him downstream. He fought against the pull, kicking toward the surface. Breaking through, he gasped for air. Overhead, the dropship circled, scanning the area. "Stay under. Don't move." Daniel took a deep breath and let the current carry him. His body ached, but he stayed still. Seconds passed like hours. Finally, the ships moved away. Only then did he allow himself to drift toward the riverbank, exhausted but alive. Regrouping at the ruins. By nightfall, Daniel reached the old Silari ruins, tall stone pillars covered in glowing alien symbols. Valkessa and Rulvek were already there, waiting. Valkessa sighed in relief. "You survived." Daniel smirked. "Told you I would." Rulvek grunted. "We don't have time to celebrate. Riggs will be coming." Valkessa held up a small data chip. "We have the proof. We just need to send it." Daniel nodded. "Then let's finish this." The final battle was coming. The ancient Silari ruins stood silent under the cold night sky. Moonlight reflected off the alien symbols carved into the massive stone pillars, giving the place an eerie glow. Daniel, Valkessa, and Rulvek crouched behind the broken walls, their breaths shallow as they listened for movement. "How much longer?" Daniel whispered. Valkessa checked her device. "The transmission is sending. A few more minutes, and command will have the proof." Rulvek gripped his weapon. "We won't have minutes. They're coming." As if on cue, a sharp whine filled the air. Dropships. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then we hold the line." The betrayer arrives. A spotlight cut through the ruins, scanning the area. The air thrummed with the sound of approaching soldiers. Then, a voice echoed through the ruins. "Surrender, and I might let you live." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Riggs." The man stepped forward, flanked by heavily armed soldiers. His smug expression burned with confidence. He thought he had already won. You should have stayed dead, soldier, Riggs taunted. Running won't save you. Daniel smirked. Who said we were running? The moment he finished speaking, Rulvek fired the first shot. The battle begins. The ruins erupted in chaos. Blaster fire lit up the night, casting shadows against the stone pillars. Daniel moved fast, weaving between cover, taking precise shots. Soldiers fell around him, but they just kept coming. Valkessa ducked behind a broken column, returning fire. The data transmission was almost complete, but if they were overwhelmed before then, it wouldn't matter. Rulvek roared as he tackled an enemy, using brute strength to throw them into a wall. Even with his strength, he couldn't fight them all. Daniel reloaded. We need an edge. Valkessa's eyes darted toward a pile of alien relics. Scifi tech. She grabbed a small, cube-shaped device and pressed a sequence of symbols. The ruins rumbled. What did you just do? Daniel shouted. Activated the ruins' defense systems. A low hum filled the air. Suddenly, energy barriers flickered to life, blocking enemy soldiers. Turrets emerged from the ground, firing glowing projectiles. The battlefield had just changed. One last fight. Riggs cursed as his forces fell back. You think this changes anything? He shouted. Daniel stepped forward. Yeah, it means you lose. Riggs growled and charged, drawing his blade. It crackled with energy. Daniel barely dodged the first swing. The second cut through the air inches from his face. This wasn't a gunfight anymore. It was personal. Blades clashed, sparks flying. Daniel fought with everything he had, but Riggs was faster, stronger. A sharp pain seared across Daniel's arm as Riggs' blade sliced through his sleeve. He staggered back. Riggs raised his weapon for the final blow. Until Valkessa struck. She lunged, driving a blade into Riggs' side. His eyes widened in shock. That was for my people. Riggs stumbled, blood dripping from his mouth. He gasped, then collapsed. The traitor was dead. Victory. The battle was over. The ruins were quiet again, except for the sound of Valkessa's device beeping. Transmission complete, she said. Command has the proof. Daniel exhaled, his body aching. Then it's done. Rulvek stood over Riggs' body and nodded. Justice has been served. Valkessa looked at Daniel, something unreadable in her gaze. You fought well, human. Daniel chuckled. Not bad for a guy who was supposed to be dead, huh? She smirked. Not bad at all. Above them, the night sky was clear once more. The war wasn't over, but for now, they had won.